most nations in the world have been way too hard on American exporters and American firms. We want to make the entire world a little bit more open to the products built by American workers. We're obviously biased. We think that they're the best in the world. On the one hand, we have our European friends saying we want to actually build up our defense. We want to do more burden sharing. But on the other hand, it seems like some of our European friends are less open for business if the people selling software and hardware are American firms. We really want and we really care about Europe being self-sufficient.
What would your expectations be for an EUUS successful discussion of these trade issues? Is there any message that we can take home to our friends in Brussels? Because that's also, from our point of view, obviously a very urgent issue.
Yeah, so to put it very simply, and we've obviously had great conversations with a lot of our European friends at the very senior levels between the president and heads of state, between me and officials in European governments, but also with trade representatives and also the very nitty-gritty technical details of a trade agreement. So these conversations are ongoing. But I'll throw a few general principles out there. I think the first is that, again, America wants its exporters and by implication its workers to be treated much more fairly. We want American markets, in the same way that American markets have been open to a lot of European goods, we'd like a lot of European markets to be open to American goods. Now there's an agriculture component to that, there's a value-added manufacturing component to that. We think that we have, in both the software but also the more harder technology side, we have some great defense technology firms where, on the one hand, we have our European friends saying we want to actually build up our defense, we want to do more burden sharing, but on the other hand, it seems like some of our European friends are less open for business if the people selling software and hardware are American firms. Well, we think that's inconsistent. We think that we have some of the best military hardware and software in the world, and we think part of being good allies is, yes, we obviously want the Europeans to take a bigger role in the continental defense, but we also think that there are a lot of great American companies that they can work with, and so, again, this doesn't have to be a zero-sum dynamic. This can be a very synergistic relationship, but the fundamental principle is we think that most nations in the world have been way too hard on American exporters and American firms. We want to make the entire world a little bit more open to the products built by American workers. We're obviously biased. We think that they're the best in the world, and we think that we can have a much better trading relationship with a lot of our European friends if they just drop some of those both tariff but also non-tariff trade barriers. There are regulatory barriers. There are sometimes you have an official at the Ministry of Defense completely disconnected, as far as we can tell, from an actual law or regulation who will just say, we're not buying American products.
Right.
Sometimes you have officials in Europe who will say, well, we're going to penalize American technology firms in a way that we would never penalize European technology firms. We just want a little bit more fairness, or to use the president's favorite word, reciprocity. And again, with Europe, we think that's a very, very easy conversation to have. We hope our European friends agree.
Great. That allows me to turn to my next or last question on NATO, because most people don't understand that the fact that we've had NATO under U.S. leadership for the last 70 years, that has been an essential instrument of international non-proliferation. Yes. If we had not had the U.S. nuclear presence in Europe, I would be prepared to give you at least 2, 3, 4, 5 countries in Europe that would have gone nuclear if they had not had this reassurance. Sure. So NATO has played a big role in nuclear non-proliferation. In 6 weeks' time, we have a NATO summit coming up. And again, there are many issues. One will be the continuing issue of defense spending. As we mentioned earlier in our discussion, Europeans are doing more, but we've also listened to demands coming out of the administration that are even more ambitious. So could you talk a little bit about your level of expectation? What would be your desired outcome of that NATO summit in terms of defense spending, in terms of how much Europe will need to do on its own in order to relieve the United States more in Europe?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple of different components to this. So first of all, what the president has said is he'd like to see 5% spending on defense in NATO. And he thinks that that is consistent with what our European friends are telling us about how much they fear some of the threats in the world. And, given, unfortunately, that a lot of European militaries have not kept pace over the past few decades, there's a bit of catching up to do. And so that is the goal that the president has set. Obviously, the European countries are going to make their own determinations, but that's what we think is a reasonable goal. But it's really not just about the spend itself. It's also how the money is spent. And it's, again, there's this fear that we have when we look at some of our European friends, and I made this point at the first Munich Security Conference I ever went to, that when I looked at Germany 10, 15, 20 years ago, one of the things that the Germans were very good about is that they had kept the industrial strength of their economy consistent with the first world standard of living. But now what we see in Europe is a lot of our European friends are deindustrializing at the very moment where we're all seeing the hard power underpinning, or the economic underpinning of real hard power requires very strong and powerful industry. And so it's not just spending money, as important as that is, it's making sure that the same economic engine that powered first world living standards is actually geared towards producing, God forbid, weapons of war if those weapons of war are ever necessary. And so I think there's both an economic component to this that's completely divorced from the spending levels, and then of course there's the spending levels too. But we really want and we really care about Europe being self-sufficient. I gave an interview a couple of weeks ago where I actually tried to make the point that, yes, we're going to have disagreements with Europe, and Europe will have disagreements with us. Sometimes, I would hearken back to 2003 United States policy in the Middle East. I frankly wish we had listened to our European friends, but I think this is an area where we're fundamentally right, and I think it's gratifying to see so many of our European friends recognize that, and recognize that Europe does really have to play a bigger role in continental defense. I think we're all aligned on it. It's just a question of getting there, and most importantly, getting there quickly.
There is a glimmer of hope in our country, in Germany. As I'm sure you've seen, we've eliminated the so-called debt brake when it comes to defense spending. So there is now the opportunity for the incoming new government in Germany to spend significantly more. In other words, I think we're in good shape in terms of responding to what you have just said. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of this wonderful discussion. I'm really grateful to you that you allowed this to be a Q&A session.
Sure.
We could continue this, I'm sure, for the rest of the morning, but I know you have other things coming up. May I simply conclude by saying that we hope very much, my team and I, that you will be willing and prepared to continue this young tradition that the United States at major Munich Security Conference events will be represented at your level. You are not the first Vice President of the United States who has come to the Munich Security Conference, but we are extremely grateful that you came in your new position. Please come again to Munich next year. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you. So if I may just say a few things in conclusion. First of all, I appreciate the kind words, and I appreciate the invitation back. I wasn't sure after February whether I'd get the invitation back, but it's good to know that it's still there.
Well, we thought about it.
Second of all, since you brought up Germany, I wanted to, of course, from the President, issue our congratulations to Chancellor Merz. And I know that we'll have a conversation with him in the next couple of days, but we're looking forward to it. And the final point that I'd make is not to rehash what's in that document, but one of the things that I said in that speech that didn't get as much airplay, but I thought was just as important, is that everything that I said there applied as much to the previous American administration as it did any government in Europe. Oh. And I think that I mean this from the heart and as a friend, that there is a trade-off between policing the bounds of democratic speech and debate and losing the trust of our people. Every single country, and we're all going to draw the lines a little bit differently, every single country says there are things that are outside the realm of political debate. I understand that, I accept that, and I'm fine if one country is going to draw those lines a little bit differently than the United States. But I think all of us, including especially the United States, we have to be careful that we don't draw the lines in such a way that we actually undermine the very democratic legitimacy upon which all of our civilization rests. And I think that is fundamentally the point here. It's not Europe bad, America good. It's that I think that both Europe and the United States, we got a little bit off track, and I'd encourage us all to get back on track together. We're certainly willing and able to participate in that work, and I think all of you all too. Thank you. God bless you.